Game of Thrones, the TV series inspired and based on George R.R. Martin's literary masterpiece, A Song of Ice and Fire. This epic saga began all the way back in 1996. Wait, are you telling me that Game of Thrones started the same year the N64 came out? That's fucking old, and it still isn't done. With 2 more books and 2 more seasons of the show, it's likely that this series will take more than 25 cumulative years to complete. Game of Thrones is currently at an all-time high in terms of popularity with the recent wrap-up of Season 6, and everyone wants to know the answer to one question: how will this story end? To answer that, we must delve deep into the inner machinations of Martin's mind. This is a good time to specify that we will be working specifically to answer how the show will end, and that there is absolutely no guarantee that the show and books will have the same ending. Also, in case you somehow haven't realized this already, spoiler warning, noobs. Time and time again, Martin has proven that he thinks differently. At every turn, he kills off main characters while simultaneously blurring the lines between who is good and who is evil. In this chaotic world of power, violence, war, and destruction, how can we know what to expect? Who will finally claim the Iron Throne when the blood has dried and the game is finished? When you play the game of theories, you win, or you make another video. So let's search for the hidden ending of Game of Thrones. The story you never knew. Let's begin our journey into the depths of madness, aka George R.R. Martin's brainhole. Although Martin has admitted that he was greatly influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, Martin has stated that he doesn't follow the stereotypical good versus bad archetype. To paraphrase Martin, the concept of good versus evil has become kind of a cartoon. We don't need anymore, here are the good guys, they're in white, there are the bad guys, they're in black. And also, they're really ugly, the bad guys. Game of Thrones parallels this quote. The Night's Watch, the good guys, are dressed completely in black, whereas the White Walkers, the bad guys, are blue? You done fucked up, Martin. You done fucked up real bad this time. But this gray area between good and bad extends south of the wall. Even Ned Stark, the heroic, valiant man that he was, had his secrets. His great victory over Sir Arthur Dayne was a complete ruse. A Stark man stabbed the great swordsman in the back right before he was about to kill Ned. This is just one lie that haunts Lord Stark's past. And there are others too. Jon Snow's heritage, for example. The Season 6 finale confirmed what fans had suspected for so long. Jon isn't Ned's bastard. He's the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. R plus L does equal J. If Ned Stark, the most noble and righteous man in Westeros, has skeletons in his closet, we can be certain the other characters are even more murky. What about seemingly evil characters? Well, the White Walkers are the baddest of the bunch, and yet we recently learned they were created by the Children of the Forest. A power of superior goodness created a power of superior badness. Originally, the Walkers were created to fight humans who were destroying the Children of the Forest's way of life. Environmental destruction symbolism aside, this shows that the White Walkers were once meant to help rather than harm. Every character fits somewhere on the fence between good and evil because, as Martin once said, we all have good and evil in us, and there are very few pure paragons, and there are very few orcs. A villain is a hero of the other side. We currently see that good and bad are not always as they appear. This insight into Martin's writing may play a very important role during the final events of Game of Thrones. Foreshadowing. This blurring of lines between good and evil is an example of Martin going against narrative norms. And this isn't the only time. Martin actively works to turn every single narrative norm on its head. Everything from main characters dying, to strong female leaders, to eunuchs and dwarves being important, to everything Prince Oberyn does during sexy time. All this is actively against the social norms of how characters should be portrayed. Martin shits on audiences' expectations. He tries to be unpredictable, but more importantly, unconventional. We will not be seeing a typical they lived happily ever after ending for this story. Martin knows too many people expect it and will never deliver on society's bullshit expectations. While shitting on society is an important theme in Game of Thrones, another equally important concept is the destructiveness of war. Not surprisingly, there's a good amount of conflict in Westeros. But does war ever bring anyone closer to their goal? Here's a sweet checklist of some peeps who have gone to battle during Game of Thrones. We've got Robb Stark, Tywin Lannister, Stannis Baratheon, Renly Baratheon, Balon Greyjoy, Daenerys, the Tyrells, Joffrey, the Mountain, the Hound, Davos Seaworth, Roose Bolton, and Jon Snow, just to name a few. Now, how many of those people died, nearly died, or were forever changed because of a near-death experience? Every single one. Martin was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War, believing that wars often bring more destruction than structure. This belief has certainly been passed down to his novels and the TV adaptation. War often leads to bloodshed, horror, and chaos, nothing more. However, war does not cause itself. The structure of feudal society plays a crucial role in the deaths of thousands. This may seem obvious, but let's review. Kings have houses backing their rule. The lords of those houses have subjects or smaller houses who fight for them. There is a hierarchy of power that brings common people to fight against each other even if they have no personal reason for fighting. The struggle to ascend this hierarchy of power is what creates more destruction. Lords and ladies squabble over lands and titles with thousands of small folk left for dead in the aftermath. Any one person having absolute power over another leads to death. We can see this in the very first scene of the show. Here we have 3 men of the Night's Watch alone beyond the wall. 2 want to turn back, but the third is in command and forces his subordinates to stay. So what happens? They all die. The structure of power leads to one man making choices that kills others. Think about the War of the 5 Kings. 5 men attempting to ascend the metaphorical ladder to absolute power. What happens to all those men? They die, and they kill thousands of innocent people in their war by forcing them to fight against each other. All of Westeros is pushed into a depression of death and chaos because the feudal structure of power puts all control in the hands of a small few. Westeros was set for mass destruction, and all it needed was a fuse to set it off. The uncertainty of Joffrey's claim to the Iron Throne was that fuse, but the carnage that followed all stemmed from Westeros's deeply entrenched feudal hierarchy. Good old George clearly paints this picture of feudal society in a harsh light. With all this in mind, we know Martin's mind. Sort of, but definitely enough to start figuring out what's going to happen. Let's revisit our conclusions so far. First, good and evil aren't always good and evil. Second, Martin shits on expectations. Third, wars by Adam Coin. And fourth, feudal society is unsustainable, man. Knowing this, what can we rule out? Well, an ending with sunshine and rainbows where everyone lives happily ever after isn't going to happen, especially since many characters already died. Jon and Dany getting married at a big wedding that Tyrion presides over while Arya and Sansa cry in the stands and Theon's cock magically grows back is not how this story will end. Martin has even said that the ending is going to be bittersweet, so the extreme opposite is just as unlikely. The White Walkers destroying all of Westeros and killing all the main characters is also not how this story will end. Many fans expect the fate of Westeros will be determined by the war between walkers and humans. But they're wrong. Look back on what we know. Martin doesn't like war. Every war we've seen thus far has left the Seven Kingdoms in worse shape than before. That combined with Martin knowing that people expect a massive war that will end all the conflict almost certainly means that this war, if it does happen, will not drive the walkers away. In Martin's world, military conflict has never led to a satisfying conclusion. But what could? Peace. But how could a peace hold up with these monsters? They're pure evil. Or are they? Remember our first conclusion. The lines between good and evil are not as they seem. These walkers are not mindless drones bent on destroying every human in existence. They were made from humans, by the magic of the children of the forest. Craster lived for decades beyond the wall and had a truce with the walkers. They took his male children and left him alone. As fucked up as that is, it does show that the walkers are capable of being reasoned with. And remember Martin's words, a villain is a hero of the other side. There is evidence that the walkers were reasoned with long ago, and that the wall itself may have been made by them as a border between their land and ours. Could humans have really constructed a 700-foot-high, 300-mile-long massive slab of ice using nothing but manual labor? It seems much more likely that they had magical help, and who better to help construct an ice wall than ice creatures? For more evidence on this, please check out Alt-Shift-X's video on the others, which influenced a lot of our thinking on this video. So, the evidence points to a Game of Thrones ending where peace is brokered between White Walker and man. But who would be able to broker such a peace? The only man who could be put in such a position of power without ever wanting it, Jon Snow. Jon seems to continually be bridging gaps between warring sides. He is able to treat with Mance Rayder and then Tormund Giantsbane, make an uneasy alliance between the Wildlings and the Night's Watch, and successfully negotiate alliances with some houses of the North to support the Stark name once again. While Jon is definitely a champion of the uneasy alliance, his heritage also shows the merging of warring peoples. To recap, Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark are Jon Snow's parents, but because of Jon's Targaryen blood, Ned took Jon as his own, protecting him from certain death by labeling him a bastard. This means that Jon is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, and that he is a mix of the two most temperature-conscious houses. Fire and blood, winter is coming. These are the house words of Targaryen and Stark. Seems a tad important considering the series is named A Song of Ice and Fire, and it also shows that Jon is the embodiment of peace between two houses that were literally killing each other during Robert's Rebellion. If that wasn't enough, the dude has some pretty obvious similarities to that Christ guy. Besides just the hair and the sweet facial do, Jon also died and came back to life a few days later. Jesus seemed like a pretty peaceful dude. Oh, and Jon's the last of the Starks to have his mythical direwolf, showing his connection to a higher power. All these signs point to Jon being the peacemaker needed for the central plot of Game of Thrones. If Jon is the central good doer of Game of Thrones, who is the central bad doer? Remember our 4 points. Who blurs the lines between good and bad in terms of action and appearance? Who would completely turn the narrative norm of the evil villain on its head? Who has taken everything they have through war and battle? Who is more power hungry than anyone else to climb the ladder to complete conquest? Who is the unmistakably beautiful conqueror of cities who we would never expect to be the ultimate villain? As Martin so aptly put it, a villain is a hero of the other side. Daenerys Stormborn, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, and Queen of the Andals, is the ultimate power to bring complete destruction to Westeros. She is blinded by her greed for the Iron Throne, conquers instead of compromises, and is the perfect antithesis to the normal villain. Daenerys is a hero to one side, but the villain to all of Westeros. If this seems like a stretch, take another look at the 4 Martin-based conclusions from earlier. Daenerys being the ultimate villain fits into each point perfectly. The White Walkers being the real, final threat just doesn't make sense with what we know about Martin's beliefs. Dany, on the other hand, fits beautifully and would make for an amazing full circle to a story that started with a mad Targaryen. Jon and Daenerys will be the final players in the Game of Thrones, but who will take the Iron Throne? Neither. Daenerys, with her violent strategies and Targaryen tendencies, will never take the crown. Martin won't allow it. Jon, however, fights only when necessary and never wants more power, but is continually pushed into these positions. Here, at the end of the story, after a peace with the Walkers finally comes, Jon will be offered the Iron Throne, his right by birth, and decline it. Jon has never wanted power and has only accepted it because he was forced into it. Here it will be offered, not forced, and Jon will not take it. Jon George Washington Jesus Snow will decline the offer, leaving the throne vacant and the power struggle finally broken. And that's the story. You never knew. So we figured it out. Maybe. Damn your confusing plot lines, Martin! But what do you think, lovely internet guys, gals, and non-gendered pals? Were you convinced? Let us know in the comments, or take the easy way out and leave a like or dislike. Or you could just subscribe. That works too. I hate when people subscribe to our channel. I just reverse psychology'd your ass.